A forestry company with close links to New Zealand First has revealed it applied for $15 million in funding from the Provincial Growth Fund. Brian Henry, who's Winston Peters' lawyer and New Zealand First's judicial officer, is a founding director of New Zealand Future Forest Products, which he helped to set up in March. Mr. Peters' partner, Jan Trotman, was also made a director of the company in August. RNZ revealed last week that Future Forest Products spent 6 months in discussions with government officials over the Provincial Growth Fund bid. The company's managing director is Brian Henry's son, David Henry. He didn't respond to requests for comment last week, but today the company has issued a lengthy statement. Our reporters Guyon, Espiner and Kate Newton have been working together on the story, and Kate joins me now in the studio. Kate, tell us what this statement that Future Forest Products put out today, what does it talk about?
Well, look, Lisa, it's a lengthy statement. As you say, there's a lot in it about the history of the company and various acquisitions they've made, but the crucial information in here is that it confirms that the company made an application to the Provincial Growth Fund, as RNZ reported last week, and it lays out exactly what they were after. And what that was is a $15 million loan that the company wanted to carry out a feasibility study for a new timber processing operation they were looking at developing in Gisborne. And so that application was under discussion for about 6 months with officials. Various in-person meetings were held, email exchanges, video conferences and so on, but it was declined just over a week ago on November the 7th by 3 Labour ministers, and Shane Jones did excuse himself from that decision. He was at the rest of the meeting but left the room for that agenda item after seeking Cabinet Office advice on whether that presented a conflict of interest.
Do we know which 3 ministers it was in the meeting?
Yes, so the 3 ministers were Grant Robertson, David Parker and Phil Twyford.
Interesting. And what about the process of applying for the loan? Given the company's connections with people, so deeply involved in the government, I mean, do they address that at all in their statement?
Yeah, so they do. Quite a long way down in the statement, I have to say, but it does address those links to New Zealand First, saying that yes, 2 directors, Jan Trotman and Brian Henry, it doesn't name them, but we assume those are the 2 that they're referring to, have personal links to the New Zealand Deputy Prime Minister, in other words, to Winston Peters. And it says that given the recent publicity, the reporting about these funding bids, both to the Provincial Growth Fund and another preliminary discussion they had over a couple of meetings around the 1 Billion Trees Fund, they've decided that it's in the company's best interests, they say, to maintain what the company refers to a higher degree of transparency than it really needs to as a private New Zealand company. It doesn't have to under company law, but it says it's going to. And very importantly, the company also says in the statement that it has no further plans to apply for financial support from the New Zealand government. We don't know if that's because of this publicity or if it's because it just felt that it had already done its dash in that regard.
So when you broke this story last week, no one from the company would talk, right?
No.
So why do we think that this statement has all of a sudden come out?
Well, look, the company may well have been preparing to say something, but this morning, crucially, Winston Peters was actually asked about this company and these funding bids by some reporters at a press stand-up he was giving at another event, and New Zealand First's links to that. And so TVNZ has supplied us with the audio of that conversation he had with reporters. It is quite an extraordinary exchange, but his main point is that he believes the proper process was followed.
An application is made, it goes through the process with no involvement of members and ministers that you're criticising, and the application failed. In other words, the system worked. So stop your narrow, myopic dirt where New Zealand First is concerned, because we're not going to take it.
So the system worked by rejecting...
But every respect the process is appropriate. But my question is, why are you asking stupid questions when the process was followed meticulously? Any conflict of interest was declared in advance.
So the National Party has already called last week for the Auditor-General to investigate Future Forest Products' dealings with the Provincial Growth Fund, but Mr Peters said again in that exchange that there's no case to answer.
And in the case of myself and Shane Jones, well, I didn't even know about it, nor did Shane Jones, to the best of our knowledge, because it was handled by the process. What on earth would the Auditor-General investigate?
But if you're confident that everything was done by the book...
No, but we're not going to have you running off in a psycho case of attack on a political party without any grounds whatsoever. No, if you want to tell me why the Auditor-General is justified, give me the reasons. Don't sit there indolently and slothfully and lazily saying you've got a case when you ain't got one.
So that was Winston Peters talking earlier today to reporters about future forest products.
Thanks, Kate. Kate Newton joining us there with that update. And the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has also said language used by senior New Zealand First MPs to both a journalist and at a farmers' protest last week is not language that she would personally use, but it's not breaking any ministerial rules. Now, today, Jacinda Ardern told reporters she'd been assured that any conflicts between New Zealand First and the company had been handled appropriately.
Within the guidelines that are set for the Provincial Growth Fund, and they exist, of course, to manage any conflict of interest that may exist with a funding application.
It isn't, and specifically, did he declare any conflict with you?
It has been dealt with appropriately, and that is the advice I've received.
Were you aware of the company before last
Of course, if a decision has been made that implicates anyone that has a close relationship with someone making an application, then that decision making should be made by someone else. And again, as I say, I'm advised that this has been dealt with appropriately.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern speaking there to the media.